Now, the often saying goes that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Now, the visual impact of documentary films and visuals are key to understanding the war in Ukraine. Now, to speak more about it, I'm joined by Honor Phillips, who is an American documentary filmmaker, reporter, and journalist, and he joins me here in the European Parliament. Now, Honor, you've been to Ukraine several times, documenting really key issues there. What have been your impressions of your journey there?
So I just came back from the east of Ukraine. I was in Kherson, Pokrovsk, and Kharkiv. So I went the whole length and bottom of the eastern front. In Pokrovsk particularly, it's a very difficult situation. Pokrovsk has now become the linchpin for the rest of Donetsk Oblast. The Russians now are trying to push to take Pokrovsk because if they can take this, they can now move to what's basically open territory beyond it. So even as we've been seeing great Ukrainian successes in Kursk, which are very positive for the war effort, it's a very tense time in Pokrovsk. As I was coming in, I saw lines of hundreds of people leaving. They had their lives attached to their cars. The streets were almost empty when I was there. The next day after I left, all institutions, chains, banks were closed. The city is preparing for a massive fight. The Russians are only a few kilometers away on the outskirts in the villages around, and there's pretty heavy fighting there. I'm connected with fighters there. These next few weeks will be very important and very difficult for the people in Donetsk.
Now, on the topic of what's important, I know that you've done some work in Ukraine, a trip there with a Polish humanitarian organization. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so one of the things I do is I work with a group called Tracher Foundation from Poland. It's led by Igor Tracz, who's a European sledding champion. Since the very first days of the war, they've been bringing aid and equipment, humanitarian supplies, medical supplies to Ukraine. Even now, 2.5 years into the war, though, the Ukrainian military is virtually out of everything. They need everything from ballistic armor to helmets to med supplies. They need infantry fighting vehicles. They need ammunition. The scale of this war is at such a level now that they are running through everything, tourniquets. So one of the things that this foundation does is they bring donated and sourced supplies directly from the UK, directly from Poland, and then they bring them straight to the front lines in Ukraine. And they do this to get it to the hands of fighters and brigades who are in the most need. So we drove from Gdansk in Poland, we drove all the way to Pokrovsk and handed off equipment into the hands of brigades who were stationed there in Pokrovsk. One thing which was very striking for me was when I was in Kharkiv, actually near Vovchansk, which is now in a very difficult position as well. We handed off supplies and equipment, again, body armor, uniforms, helmets, you name it, to a brigade there. The guys who received this from us were still wearing some of the equipment that they had received on the last mission weeks ago. So the Ukrainian military is operating at a very large scale, and the rate this is a real full-scale war, and they really need help. So the work that this group, Tracher Foundation, does is very effective and very important, and lots more needs to be done.
Now, lots more needs to be done indeed. Now, tell me, you've had those journeys going to the east across the front line, meeting Ukrainian troops. Now, what's your sense? I'm curious about their mood, their morale. Are they exhausted? Do they sense victory? Tell us about your impressions there.
That's a really good question, and it's an important question. A lot of the Ukrainian soldiers have now been fighting for over 2 years. So of course they're exhausted. Of course they're fatigued. They also feel neglected by the people in the West. They don't have enough ammunition. They don't have enough equipment. That being said, I've never seen such clarity of purpose in soldiers who have to do their job as in the east of Ukraine. These guys who are on the front lines, who are in constant danger and constant peril, even though they're tired, they know what has to be done. And one of the things I heard over and over and over again is, all we need is the weapons. We need the weapons and the permissions to use them, and we can get this done. When I was there, I saw 18, 19-year-old guys, basically just out of what would be high school in the U.S., serving with grandfathers who were in their early 60s in the very same squad, right? this is the nature of things in Ukraine. This is existential for them. But the shared thought with all of these guys, from Kherson all the way up to Kharkiv, is this is existential for us. This is our family. We have the will to fight and win for victory. We just need the tools.
Now, not enough, indeed. That is something, a message that we've been hearing for quite some time. But I'm curious about, what's happening right now in Kursk? Those efforts by the Ukrainians on Russian territory. What are the impressions there by Ukrainians on the local ground level? Tell us about that.
I think it's incredibly inspiring, and it's an uplift in their morale. Initially, for sure, everybody could feel that. There was a real sense of taking the reins back, and it also showed that the Ukrainians can act with autonomy, and they can act decisively. At the same time, for those soldiers which are stationed in forward positions in the east in places like Pokrovsk, it's also frustrating for them because to win a war of this scale, you kind of need to be able to do what's happening in Kursk in multiple places. So even as it's a morale boost to see what's happening in Kursk, and it's remarkable what's been accomplished there, at the same time, when you're out of ammunition and you don't have enough infantry fighting vehicles, you really feel the situation. So I think there's great pride in what's taking place there, but I also think there's a real sense that something needs to change very fast, and they need the reinforcements and the equipment that is necessary.
I understand that you were also at the Paris Olympics speaking to some Ukrainian athletes there. I wonder, what was their mood? Training under fire in Ukraine must have been a challenge. Tell us about your conversations with the Ukrainian athletes.
You're exactly right. I was in Paris for the 2024 Olympics, and my team and I had the opportunity to speak with several Ukrainians from the Olympic team. One was Yaroslava Mahuchek, who's the world record holder in high jump. I was so impressed at the spirit that they have there. These Ukrainian athletes are not going there as individuals. They're going there as representatives of their country. And Yaroslava Mahuchek is a perfect example of this. She's probably 23 years old, and she stands up and she has her gold medal, and she says, "This is for my country. This is for the fighters who are defending my country. This is for my people and our identity as Ukrainians." So it was incredibly inspiring. I'm not Ukrainian, but it was so inspiring to see this. There's a sense of unity among all of them because they all know they're in the same fight. And all Ukrainians feel this because everywhere in the country is affected. A few days ago, a family was wiped out in Lviv. So there's no place which is untouched. So to speak with these Olympians, some of them world champions, and to hear their spirit is amazing.
Now let's bring it for a moment more into the modern day right now. We had that Trump-Harris debate, but if we listen to both those candidates, none of them really gave us a solution of how this war potentially could end. What's your impression from that debate as an American and as someone who's been to Ukraine?
As an American, I would like to say that our allies can always rely on us, but I think that the reality of what we've seen over the last 2.5 years is that people become distracted, there's factionalism, and there is division in the response to what's taking place in Ukraine. From my perspective, I think what's taking place in Ukraine affects policy all over the world. It affects what happens in the Middle East, in North Africa, in Asia. So my hope would be that Americans, both on the right and on the left, like how it is in the United Kingdom, would understand that this is not just a Ukrainian problem, this is a problem of liberty and of the Western way of life. So to be honest, I'm not particularly inspired by either parties, the way either parties have handled things. I would like to see more. I would like to see more clarity of vision. I would like to see decisive action. Standing by our allies in the United Kingdom and in Poland and here in Belgium and in the Netherlands. I hope that's one of my goals, actually, is to help show Americans the spirit of Ukrainians and the moment that we're in right now, which is times are changing and Americans need to step up and Americans need to lead.
And now for the final question, and you've also done some work in terms of documenting war crimes, what the Russians perpetrated in Irpin and Bucha. Now recently we've had a visit by President Putin in Mongolia. That ICC warrant, that's a signatory, but he wasn't arrested. What's your impression from that?
Well, I had the opportunity to speak with some individuals who lived through the occupation of Bucha, also some who were able to escape partway through. I was able to speak with people who had to deal with rape and everything that took place in Irpin, also some individuals from the east of the country as well. The issue of war crimes it's not just a sub-thought. This needs to be showed to everyone in the world, because the practice of the Russian Federation systemically is to use terror and is to use acts of war crimes as a matter of policy. We see this through consistent use of torture chambers, execution of prisoners, deportation of tens of thousands of Ukrainian children for reindoctrination into the Russian way of life, and the persistent and consistent attacks on civilians and on civilian infrastructure as a matter of policy. So when I saw that Putin went to Mongolia, which is a member of the ICC, I was incredibly disappointed, not just in Mongolia, but in our Western leaders, because when something like that happens, we need to stop and we need to say, we've crossed a line now. We're not dealing with just a rogue agent here. We're dealing with somebody who rejects the very principles of humanity, which we say we're all about. It's another reminder that Russia needs to be dealt with completely now, because they've shown that zachistska, which is this term that they use for, cleansing and tactical operations of how do we suppress a place, zachistska, torture, killing, executions, all these things. This is a matter of practice for them, and it's been this way for 25 years, even after the fall of the Soviet Union.
All really interesting points. I mean, it's something that needs to be done more, looking at Ukraine, telling the world its story. Honor, thank you so much for all that. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
And thank you for watching. I was Sasha Farbach for TVP World in Brussels.